fat exemplifies success. It is the fuel that powers their ability to endure winter hibernation, as well as the key to their reproductive success. Welcome to Fat Bear Week, everyone. Brought to you by Katmai National Park, the Katmai Conservancy, and explore.org. My name is Mike Fitz, and I'm the resident naturalist with explore.org. My co-hosts today for this live event are rangers from Katmai National Park, Naomi, Boak, and Brooklyn White. Great to speak with you once again, and I'm very much looking forward to how Fat Bear Week shapes up. What about you?
Hello. Today I come to you from King Salmon in our visitor center, which is in the airport, so you might hear some planes going by. I am very excited. Only 6 more sleepless nights.
I would say Fat Bear Week is my favorite week of the year. It's so exciting, and yes, it is a lot of work, but it's absolutely worth it. So I'm very excited to see who is going to ultimately be crowned Fat Bear Week champion.
Maybe the only thing Fat Bear Week is missing is candy, but I can always maybe go to the store and get some. So maybe that would make it the ultimate holiday week. But today we're going to talk a little bit about Fat Bear Week, how to participate in it. But we really want to focus on the importance of fat in the lives of brown bears. And before we get into the main part of our chat, I do want to remind our audience, if you haven't taken the Bear Cam survey yet, please take a few moments to do so. You can find a link to that in the featured comment at the bottom of the page. I'm working with a team of researchers, and we're very interested to know more about your Bear Cam viewing experience and your thoughts on the bear cams as it relates to some of the individual bears and conservation. So please check that out if you haven't done so already. And thanks to everyone who has already filled it out. But like we said before, this is Fat Bear Week. So Brooklyn, do you want to walk us through Fat Bear Week, the philosophy behind it, and how people can participate in it?
Of course. Fat Bear Week is truly this celebration of the hard work that it takes to survive. The bears are packing on those pounds, and so we're able to look at photos that compare their summer bodies to their fall bodies and look at these amazing transformations. So this year is very different than in years past. We partnered with explore.org and the Katmai Conservancy to create a website. And so this is allowing a broad audience to be able to participate. You don't just have to be on Facebook or on a specific social media. This allows anybody who has a love of fat bears to vote. So we are posting matchups between bears head-to-heads. And so you will have the opportunity to vote on the bear that you believe is the fattest or has had the most significant weight gain through the season. Or maybe knowing their story is going to contribute to why you vote for a bear. Whether that bear is not only packing on the pounds for themselves, but making sure that their cubs are also getting healthy and fat along with them. So when you go to the website, you're going to see 2 options. You're going to be able to select with that vote button and select the bear that you would like to see. We do have 2 matchups every day for the first couple days. That first matchup debuts at 8 a.m. Alaska time, 9 Pacific. And that second matchup will debut at noon Alaska time or 1 Pacific. So if you've seen one matchup, just hold on because there'll be another one coming. But Naomi, would you mind sharing with us about the upcoming matchups that we have? We actually have a matchup going on right now. Could you share about those bears or what we're hoping to see?
Sure. The matchup right now, you guys, so many of you voted that you broke the internet this morning. I just want to say one thing about fatbearweek.org, which is we ask you to put your email address in there. We're not using it for anything else but to ensure there's no voter fraud. That makes sure that you only vote once. So we want to keep this fair. So the matchup that's going on right now is between bear 151 and bear 856. And 151, Walker, has just come into his prime. He's big. He is a big bootied bear. 856 is our big boss. He's the most dominant bear here on the river. He's a little taller than 151, so he holds his weight a little better, just like humans. But this is a tough competition, so go and vote. You can vote until 6 p.m. Alaska time, 10 p.m. Eastern time. The matchup that starts today at noon Alaska time, 4 p.m. Eastern time, is between bear 402 and her one-time cub 812. And this is tough because mother against son. Mother is one of the oldest bears on the river and one of the most experienced moms. She knows how to teach her cubs how to fish. So 812 has done really well learning from mom and gotten really big. So that's the second one today. And the winner of the 151-856 matchup goes up against bear 480 Otis, two-time Fat Bear Week champion. So that's going to be an interesting matchup because Otis is still doing really well. 402 and 812's winner goes up against the big guy, 747. So that will really be an interesting matchup. Tomorrow, we have two more face-to-face matchups. And the first one that begins at 8 a.m. Alaska time, noon on the East Coast, is bear 32 Chunk versus 719, a member of the Queen of Corpulence's royal family, a daughter who now has two cubs. So it's an independent big male versus a young mama. So, and the winner of that gets to compete with the Queen of Corpulence herself, bear 435 Holly, on the next day or on Saturday. Then the other matchup that begins a little later today, tomorrow, noon our time in Alaska, 4 p.m. on the East Coast, is bear 909 versus Holly's Spring Cub. Now, this is the youthful vote. 909 is a subadult. Both these bears are offspring of former Fat Bear Week champions. So this is quite a matchup. And, Holly's cub, being a spring cub, is a lot smaller, but increased her weight a lot this year. First year cubs increased their weight significantly, 60 times. And 909 has been fattening up on the lip as she's been taught by her champion mother. So those are the matchups for the next few days. Keep coming back to Katmai National Park and Katmai Conservancy and explore.org social media. And please come back to fatbearweek.org to vote. We will be announcing the poll results at 6 p.m. Alaska time every day and 10 p.m. on the East Coast. So, Mike, how do bears get so fat?
Well, it's a good question, and I think a topic to explore in detail. We see bears kind of getting fat in a couple of different ways. Internally, they're experiencing a remarkable transition where they become resistant to hormones that might suppress appetite or make them feel full overall. And right now, they're experiencing a phase in their life called hyperphagia, and that essentially means just excessive eating. At this time of the year, for bears, it's not excessive, though. It's not pathology in bears. It's actually an adaptive function that helps them to gain the fat reserves necessary to survive winter. And they're going to be spending more and more time actually seeking food, searching for food, eating food, and less time in other activities. We may still see some bears partaking in play, fights, for instance, or doing other things, but most of their effort, the vast majority of their effort at this time of the year, is going to be focused on the pursuit of food. Naomi, do you want to talk a little bit more, though, about like the physiology of hyperphagia? Because hyperphagia definitely is something that we can see, a behavior with the bears, food seeking so much. But it happens internally within them as well with those hormonal changes.
Yeah, so when bears enter this phase of hyperphagia, which happens in the fall, they always feel hungry. They never feel full. And what happens is the hormone leptin which we have as well and has the same function in our bodies. Leptin tells us that we're full, that we don't need to eat anymore. Well, that leptin switch gets turned off when the bears are in hyperphagia, and they never feel full. So they continue to eat and eat and eat. And we see behaviors of this. We see them constantly eating. We see cubs demanding food from their mothers, fighting with their siblings over fish scraps in the lower river. And that's because they are constantly hungry. And they have no hormonal mechanism to tell them when they're full. As the season wears on, the metabolism slows down some, and they slow down, and this coincides with the disappearance of the dead salmon scraps. By then, they've eaten most of those scraps, or the scraps are just not good enough to eat, and so they start slowing down and eventually head off to their dens. And Brooklyn, tell us about the importance of salmon in the lives of these bears in getting fat for denning.
Absolutely. I mean, salmon truly is paramount to the ability for bears to reach the size that we are now able to celebrate during this week. But the salmon, it only takes, especially at the very beginning of the season, when the salmon haven't spawned out, and so they still have the highest caloric content that they're going to have, the highest fat content that they're going to have. So when bears are utilizing salmon from the river, it only takes a couple salmon at that beginning of the run for a bear to not only meet the calorie requirement to surpass how many calories they have actually expended fishing the river, but then to start bulking up. So the more salmon that a bear is able to eat, especially at the beginning of that run, is going to allow those bears to bulk up faster. But salmon remain that primary food source for bears on the river all the way until the end of October, beginning of November, when those last salmon scraps, as you mentioned, Naomi, have started to dissipate. But the salmon are, because of that high fat content, that is what allows the bears to bulk up so quickly. And it also allows the bears to reproduce, as we are going to look at here. So, Mike, would you be able to share the significance of fat for bears kind of in that beginning stage of life? Because it has a different significance to depending on the age of a bear, whether it's a cub, a subadult, or an adult. The importance of fat kind of changes in each phase of life. So could you share about the importance of fat for cubs?
Sure thing. And I think we're going to try to talk about some of the individual bears in Fat Bear Week and relate it to the importance of fat to their specific lives. And I think it's perhaps appropriate to start with our youngest cub in Fat Bear Week, talking about how fat is important to it. And that's 435 Holly's cub. We were looking at that live camera footage just a few moments ago. That was Holly and her cub in the mouth of Brooks River, continuing to try to get fat and scavenging any salmon that really can't swim away. You know, when they're in the water, it's hard to tell just how big these bears are. Holly's cub, though, is sizable. She looks small compared to the other bears, but Holly's cub at this time of the year probably weighs about 60 or 70 pounds, and that's a remarkable weight for a bear to have, considering that when she was born in late January or early February, she only weighed about a pound. So when you look at the overall growth of all of the bears in Fat Bear Week, the Holly's cub has grown proportionally more than any of the other bears. And the fuel, again, that allowed her to really gain so much of her body mass over the summertime and springtime has been fat. It's come in mostly in the form of mother's milk. When cubs are born, they're born in the den in midwinter while mother is hibernating. They only weigh about a pound at that time. And they immediately just begin to suckle. About the only thing that they can do is suckle and cry. And mothers are very attentive in the den at that time of the year to their cubs crying. They'll continue to nurse throughout the denning, through the rest of that denning cycle. Once they come out of the den, a cub might weigh 12 or 15 pounds or so, but his growth rate really skyrockets during those first few months outside of the den. And as we can see now with Holly's cub, I mean, it's grown tremendously over the past several months. It looks like almost a completely different animal compared to what it looked like in June when we first saw it at Brooks River. I wouldn't be surprised if Holly's cub is actually more than 70 pounds now. We know that spring cubs at this time of the year at Brooks River generally weigh around 60 or 70 pounds or so, but Holly's cub looks kind of big, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was actually a little bit bigger. Going into the den this year, Holly's cub needs to survive on her own body fat reserves. So she won't be nursing inside of the den anymore. So her physiology is going to transition into what we would normally consider to be a hibernative physiology for brown bears. So she is, getting fat not only just to put body mass on and grow her frame over time, but she needs those fat reserves to survive winter hibernation, just like all of the adults and independent bears that we see along Brooks River. For those young independent bears, like the subadults like 909 Brooklyn, they're facing maybe some similar constraints to get fat and survive winter as a cub might, but they don't have mother's guidance anymore to help them survive.
It's true. Being an independent bear comes with a variety of challenges. As you mentioned, Mike, a young bear, they are growing not only in size but in stature. And so when we're looking at an independent bear like 909, not only is she bulking up, but she is also growing as a bear into her adult size. So as we look at 909, we can see that she has been able to utilize the fishing techniques that she learned from her mother by watching. Now, an independent bear still has to do a lot of testing. They're figuring out, how do I actually utilize the river? I may have seen how other bears fish, but doesn't mean I can do it myself. So she has had to learn how to utilize different spots on the river, but specifically the lip, which is one of her favorite spots to fish. And she's gotten really good. As we can see, she has gained a lot of weight. And this is important because when she goes to den, she is responsible solely for her survival. So the salmon that she has been able to collect and the fat that she has put on her body is what is going to keep her through, what is going to allow her to survive winter and emerge next spring. So we're going to see how she continues to grow because she's not done growing yet. She is not yet an adult bear, so she still has plenty of weight and height and size to gain as she continues to grow. But it's really interesting to see how a young bear transitions into a young adult bear. And Naomi, you can share with us a little bit about the experience that 812 has had as he transitioned into adulthood and what the significance of the fat that he's been able to put on means for him on the river.
Yeah, well, bear 812 is a young adult bear, a few years older than 909, and the bears still are growing at this stage. We classify them as young adults around age 5 because that's about when they mature sexually. And then they're still doing a lot of growing. They can grow into their teens, as we've seen with some other bears. So again, bear 812 is not only bulking up for this winter's hibernation and the lack of food, but he's growing in size as well. And he, like 909, learned some fishing techniques from his mother. His mother was bead nose, bear 409, and she also was, his mother was bear 402. And bear 402 was also a lip fisher, and she would take her cubs right away, even during their first year, to learn how to fish on the lip. So he does that sometimes. sometimes he fishes in the jacuzzi, which is right under the lip, and that's where a lot of the big bears fish. So he didn't learn that from 402. He learned it from watching other bears, which is also interesting. And he has some distinctive fishing habits, like he likes to bring his catch to a big rock to eat. So he has some dining tables out there next to the jacuzzi and above the falls. And look at the difference in his size from June until late September. He really learned how to put on the pounds. And so he's really ready for hibernation. Mike, what happens with bears in terms of reproduction? I know that hierarchy is really important as bears grow up, and also what happens in terms of reproduction and being able to be fat?
That is, well, it's vitally important to a bear's reproductive success as well. I think we're going to try to get into a couple of examples of this with two of our Fat Bear Week bears, such as number 402 and number 856. Both of those bears kind of have a soap opera-like relationship with one another. They've been seeing coupling, over several years. There's many other life events associated with them that we can't get into right now, but they definitely have a complicated relationship. They're one of the 402 is one of the largest females on the river. 856 is the river's most consistently dominant male over the last several years, and fat is vitally important to both of those animals. Females like 402 Brooklyn, they need a certain percentage of fat actually to be able to bear young in the den and support their offspring inside of the den. 402, when we take a look at her, she's perhaps not just eating for herself right now, but she could be pregnant with cubs right now.
It's very possible. And what is so fascinating about the process of pregnancy with bears is that it takes having that percentage of fat for a bear to truly become pregnant. And so we have seen this growth of 402. And so it's very possible that when we see her emerge next spring, that she will have cubs in tow that she gave birth to in the den. As we mentioned earlier, describing the significance of fat to cubs, her fat not only is going to allow her first to be successful in pregnancy, but also if she does have cubs, those cubs are going to be relying on that fat to produce mother's milk and to have that density of calories that are going to allow those cubs.
Oops.
Oh, maybe we lost Brooklyn.
Yeah, I think we lost Brooklyn.
Okay, maybe I'll just kind of carry her thought along while we wait for her to reconnect. Inside of the den, again, mother bears aren't eating or drinking, but they're giving birth. It's actually remarkable. Bears are the only mammals that will give birth while hibernating. So that period of time is a time of limited calories overall, and need to somehow support the growth of their newborn cubs. It's difficult for mother bears to support the growth of newborn cubs in their womb without a protein source, though. It seems like fat has maybe a difficult time, crossing the placental boundary. So when brown bear cubs are born, they're born really kind of like we talked a little about before, they're sort of premature in that sense. They're not able to really move about. They're completely reliant on their mother, and the mother is able to draw energy from her fat reserves into her lactation process and provide really fatty milk that allows those cubs to survive. I think, Brooklyn, are you back? I think we were just kind of trying to carry some of the thoughts that you were mentioning before. But yeah, drawing fat from mother is able to draw from her fat reserves to provide milk to her cubs instead of relying on her protein reserves if she were to have a longer pregnancy. Or the pregnancy of bears is actually pretty short. It's only just several weeks.
Yeah, so when we are looking at just this success of 402, she has a long history of successful litters with multiple cubs. So it's very likely that we're going to see her yet again return with more cubs, given her very fertile past. But this success and this weight gain is truly then going to be a reward for her and her cubs in the future. So it's exciting to see this continued success of this bear. But reproduction is not just for female bears when we're looking at interactions along the river. Naomi, could you share a little bit about the importance of fat when it comes to males on the river and what that means for reproduction?
Sure. It means a lot. We talk about bear 856, who is a bear around 20 years old, and he has been the most dominant bear on the river for almost a decade. And so there are a lot of things that go into that. Attitude is one, and he certainly has that. Size is another. Some bears can move up in the hierarchy just because of their size. And we talked a little bit about young adults and when they grow, and part of what they learn as they grow is their position in the hierarchy. What fishing spots will they be allowed to be in? And as they mature as adults, what females they will have access to. And a bear that is as big and fat and dominant as 856, he is able to have his choice of females. Now, bears do court females. They don't just say, I want you, and that's it. But it does, 856 does have more options because other male bears are not going to challenge him very often for access to females. So, but on the flip side of that, we saw bear 856 spend almost 2 weeks following and courting the wonderful 402. And during that time, he was not fishing as much. So it's the flip side of having those access to females. He had to pursue her for almost 2 weeks and spend less time fishing and more time following her. But he caught up after that. And, the other part of that is if you're not that fat, you're not that successful in bulking up, and you as a male bear are pursuing a female, that time not fishing is going to be more detrimental to your success in bulking up for hibernation. So fat reserves are really important. They're important for a male's place in the hierarchy and access to females. And it's also important to have those reserves when, as a male, you are pursuing a female. So Mike, do you have some additional thoughts for us today?
Well, I do think that when you thinking about the reproductive aspects and how fat relates to that, I think that's a fascinating aspect of the bear world as it relates to female reproduction and cub growth and her ability to support the cubs in the den, like Brooklyn was talking about, and like what you were talking about, Naomi, with 856. Fat is extremely important for him to fuel his pursuit of females in the springtime. When bears come out of the den, we talk about wintertime hibernation with bears. We talk about how they get fat a lot in summertime, but we don't often talk a lot about what happens to bears in the springtime. When bears come out of the den in Katmai National Park, there's really not a lot to eat. It's a pretty lean season for them, really a season of starvation. The mating season really doesn't ramp up in Katmai until late spring, but males will wander widely during that time period, looking for females who might be receptive to mating. And fat really is, the fuel, those leftover fat reserves from the hibernation period and from this time of the year when they're bulking up. That's going to allow them to pursue. That's going to provide a lot of energy. That's going to allow them to pursue those mating opportunities when they might not be feeding as much and still losing weight. So the mating season really is a time of the year when bears are kind of at their leanest. They're not finding a lot of really high calorie food sources until the salmon arrives. So fat is vitally important for both males and females during that time of the year. Overall, though, fat I think is we can't overstate its importance when we're thinking about it's how it relates to brown bears. We can I want to remind everybody, of course, to be sure to cast your Fat Bear Week vote at fatbearweek.org. Fat Bear Week really is a celebration of bears and salmon and the health of Katmai and Bristol Bay. Bears are perhaps a conspicuous example, maybe the most conspicuous example of the region's productivity and an ability to support the last great salmon run on Earth. As a fuel for a bear's reproductive success and overall survival, though, it really is hard, like I mentioned before, to overstate the importance of fat. Young and old bears need ample fat reserves to survive winter hibernation. Pregnant bears need fat to give birth and nurse their cubs while still hibernating. And outside of the den in the spring, a bear's remaining fat reserves are necessary to sustain them during a time of year that typically has little reliable food. So as you cast your Fat Bear Week votes, again, fatbearweek.org, consider the challenges each bear must overcome in order to get fat and what its fat reserves ultimately mean for its survival. Brooklyn, Naomi, it was always great to speak with you, and thanks for helping me co-host this kickoff live chat for Fat Bear Week.
It's great. I agree with Brooklyn. Best week of the year.
Yep, I couldn't be more excited to see what happens.
And thanks to the Explore.org tech team for making these live chats possible and making the Fat Bear Week website a success. And thanks to the army of our Explore.org volunteer camera operators who are driving the cameras and giving everyone such a wonderful bear viewing experience at Brooks River. Go check out the bears on Explore.org right now, explore.org/bears. And also, again, please vote in Fat Bear Week for each one of the matchups. And don't forget, Team 747, you need to step up. So let's go 747. Have a great day, everyone. My name is Mike Fitz with Explore.org. And please stay well during these challenging times.